welcome to this very, very exciting segment today. And of course, as we know that today, the 18th of February is many organizations in Brisbane here are celebrating Sivaratri, including Gayatri Mandir, and of course, Lakshmi Narayan Mandir, Vishnu Maya Mandir, and of course, Divya Jyoti Jagriti Sansthan. So, there's so much that's happening today. As we can see that the Divya Jyoti Jagriti Sansthan in Scott Street and Ridge Street in Northgate. And of course, we have some very amazing upcoming events that we will be talking about. But first of all, as I promised that today, we have a bonus track for you. Have a listen. Let's start with that.
Dream on, little dreamer. This is how it all begins. Dream on, little dreamer. This is how it all begins. Move your feet. Feel how sweet is. Dream on, little dreamer. Follow all of your signs.
Thought the track would be a little bit longer, but let's see how we go with another track because is a wonderful artist when we'll talk about it.
Dream on, little dreamer. Follow all of your signs. Dream on, little dreamer. This is how it all begins. बन्नो रे बन्नो मेरी चली ससुराल को अखियों में बानी दे गई दुआ में मीठी गुड़दानी ले गई है बन्नो रे बन्नो मेरी चली ससुराल को अखियों में बानी दे गई दुआ में मीठी गुड़दानी ले गई रे कबीरा रे फकीरा आजा तुझको पुकारे तेरी परछाइयां रे कबीरा मान जा रे फकीरा यूं न जा कैसा तू है मेरे मोही कैसा रजाइयां एक कबीरा एक कबीरा एक कबीरा एक फकीरा एक कबीरा एक कबीरा एक फकीरा टूटे चारपाई वही ठंडी पुरवाही रास्ता देके धुंधों की मलाही वही मिट्टी की सुराही रास्ता देके टूटे चारपाई वही ठंडी पुरवाही रास्ता देके धुंधों की मलाही वही मिट्टी की सुराही रास्ता देके गुड़िया रे गुड़िया तेरा गुड्डा परदेसिया जोड़ी आसमानी हो गई शगुन पे देखो शांदमानी हो गई हाय गुड़िया रे गुड़िया तेरा गुड्डा परदेसिया जोड़ी आसमानी हो गई शगुन पे देखो शांदमानी हो गई रे कबीरा मान जा रे फकीरा यूं न जा आजा तुझको पुकारे तेरी परछाइयां रे कबीरा मान जा रे फकीरा यूं न जा कैसा तू है मेरे मोही कैसा हर जाइया रे कबीरा रे फकीरा एक कबीरा रे फकीरा एक कबीरा.
So, ladies and gentlemen, these are some text stressed, and the main ones will be coming on with the Music Junction, with the date to be announced, and that's none other than our Musawir Ali, and is a wonderful, wonderful local artist right here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, let's look at some of the news. The funding agreement has now been reached for the Olympics.
Signed, sealed, now time to deliver.
This will consolidate this great city, as a global powerhouse.
The Prime Minister and Queensland Premier today inking a $7 billion joint deal to help stage the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games in the Sunshine State.
This is about the future. This is about setting Queensland up.
I know, as a Sydney-sider, the difference that a Games can make.
The federal government will spend $2.5 billion on the Brisbane Arena, a 17,000-seat indoor entertainment venue to host swimming and water polo events. The state will fund the $2.7 billion demolition and rebuild of the Gabba. The 50,000-seat stadium will have improved disability and transport access and host the athletics and major ceremonies. $1.8 billion will go towards upgrading 9 existing venues and building 5 new ones.
You'll see more and more events attracted to this great state of Queensland, not just here in the southeast, but right throughout the state.
Along with the Gabba, the Brisbane Arena will connect to the Cross River Rail, with work on the indoor venue to start in 2027. Anastasia Palaszczuk insists $7 billion will be the final price tag for Olympic infrastructure for the 2032 Games. She also defended a $1.7 billion blowout for rebuilding the Gabba, which was originally set to cost $1 billion.
The prices have gone up for commodities and everything, and in terms of we're going to be doing the demolition.
The stadium will be torn down and rebuilt by 2030. Rachel Rieger, ABC News, Brisbane.
Yes, costs do keep going up, but things they really do need to be factored in. Well, right now, parts of Australia is going through severe heat wave.
We now have a heat wave. We've not seen much heat across the country in the past 3 years. Bit of a shock to the system, but certainly it is February. We should be expecting some heat and the peak of summer. And the dry air, hot air, as you mentioned, covering large swathes of the country at the moment, from northwest WA right through to the coastal areas in WA, even into the eastern inland. You can check out the map here at the moment, right across northwestern Australia through to the eastern inland. We can see a very, very sharp area of hot air. But coastal areas, Fauzi, and the southeast have seen some relief overnight with a cooler southeast to southerly flow. But unfortunately, for those about 50 to 100 kilometres inland of the coast, it is quite hot still. And look at those temperatures in the far northwest of WA, up towards the high 40s. So certainly getting very close to record territory, but not quite yet.
Gosh, it looks terrible at the moment.
It does.
I guess the question everyone wants to know is, how long is this going to last for?
Well, we've got certainly a heatwave forecast across the northwest of WA through parts of South Australia into the eastern inland as we go through the weekend. There are two parts to this heatwave. We've got one that's sitting in the east at the moment. That will wash out a little bit over the course of the weekend over eastern inland New South Wales and Queensland. But it's the heatwave activity over northwest WA stretching down into parts of the Eucla and the Nullarbor Plains later in the weekend into early next week. That's probably where we'll see the most severe to extreme heatwave activity in the course of the next week. So certainly it is baking out there through some parts of WA. Thankfully, in very remote parts of WA, but in those Pilbara areas, very hot conditions can be expected up over the next 3 to 4 days.
Now, can we expect any bushfire warning? Should we be careful if we're out and about? Shouldn't perhaps strike a match anywhere that's dry?
That's a very good point. At this point in time, it is summer, and we always have to be aware of the fire dangers. There are some fire weather warnings out through parts of the southern NT at the moment, particularly through the Alice Springs Fire Command at the moment, and also through parts of the eastern inland with those very hot temperatures. They'll be popping up from time to time. If you're living on property with bush, with a lot of grasslands, there's been so much water fall in the past 3 years that the growth is going to be very, very much above normal. Just have your wits about you. It is that time of year. Be very careful with machinery. There doesn't need to be a fire weather warning to practice safety out there. So that is the advice really moving forward through the remainder of summer and really right in through most of March at this stage.
Very good advice there. Now, Carl, it is cyclone season. We can't avoid that, of course.
No.
You know, we were talking about Tropical Cyclone Freddie, which formed off WA coast some time ago. More cyclones along the way. Talk to us about cyclone season. What's happening now?
So we have got Freddie that's sitting all the way back into the central Indian Ocean. Look at this track, quite remarkable run of this system. It is still heading westbound, likely to hit the eastern side of Madagascar, coming up around about, I'd say, Wednesday, Thursday, and then heading in towards parts of Africa. A remarkably long-lived system. Now, let's head back home, and we'll probably see some tropical activity still sitting around the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now, there's been some flooding between Kawanyama and Karumba over the past 36 to 48 hours with the ABC team up there in the northwest covering the flooding at the moment. That rainfall is easing. Further tropical cyclone activity is expected between now and the end of April. It is a peak of cyclone season. For residents around the Darwin region, where I am at the moment, it's pretty dry at the moment. There is some very small signal for some tropical activity to develop later this week. Just, again, like the fire dangers down south, have your cyclone kits ready up here. Be weather aware. This is severe weather season across the country, and make sure you pay attention to all the official forecasts and warnings from the Bureau.
So that's the news there from the Bureau, and of course, very rightly said that even whenever you're out and about, always take care. And before heading out for any major activities, always check out the weather conditions and any warnings that have been put out by the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. Well, right now, talking about emergencies, we have all this interest rate hike. So what has been the reasoning? Where are we with the inflation?
Inflation is merely the rises in price of goods and services. So going to the grocery store, getting your hair cut. And in Australia, we measure it by something called the Consumer Price Index, which is CPI, and has a whole basket of thousands of goods and services. They're trying to work out what the average household spends. Now, at the moment, it's running at 7.8% for 12 months ending December. And so that's extraordinarily high, and that's the concern of the Reserve Bank.
Okay, then explain to us the link between raising interest rates and then trying to stem the rise of inflation.
So to bring inflation down, you need to cool the economy, and that means you get people to spend less. So how the Reserve Bank does that is by lifting interest rates so those with mortgages pay more, less money in their pocket, and also when you're borrowing to buy big ticket items like a car, you probably can't. So less spending means that inflation will come down.
What does that do more broadly to the economy? Higher inflation, obviously we see higher prices, but what does longer term high inflation, what impact does that have on the health of the economy?
So built-in inflation will mean more pain as we go through the cycle, because those that have the least funds end up suffering the most. So what happens is when inflation is very high, there is a higher risk of the Reserve Bank coming in very strongly and raising interest rates too high. And that means the economy could go into recession, which is not good for anyone.
No. We'll get to the recession, the big R word, in just a minute, but, you know, we've already seen these 9 interest rate hikes already. Philip Lowe has signalled there's a possibility of more to come. Inflation is still high. So, I mean, what is the point? Why? Why is it still high?
So what happens is there's a certain amount of money still in the economy. People have built up savings buffers, about $300 billion that's sitting there, that means people can suffer this a bit longer before changing their spending habits. Also remember, with mortgages, fixed rate mortgages were extraordinarily popular because the interest rates were so low and people locked in rates. About $880,000 mortgages are coming off fixed rates this year, and that means a mortgage cliff, and they're going to have massive rises in their repayments, and so it takes a little while for the effects of these interest rate rises to go through the economy.
Yeah, so as you say, it takes a while for the interest rate rises to impact inflation. What are the other tools in the toolbox that could help to curb inflation?
So the Reserve Bank uses monetary policy, which we spoke about, increasing interest rates. The government handles what we call fiscal policy, and that means they can do things like increasing taxes. They can reduce their spending. Now, the problem is that monetary policy interest rates tends to be a bit more nimble in affecting interest rates, whereas fiscal policy, so the government making big changes, often goes to a federal budget, has to go through Parliament. It can be quite a lag. Now, Treasury have said at the moment fiscal policy is neutral. It's neither helping interest rates and inflation or hurting them. It's neutral. Maybe they need to do more.
So there is a possibility that the next budget we might actually see some sort of tools being built in to try to bring down the inflation as well.
That would be our hope, but you imagine the political pressure on governments to make sure that they ease the burden of these higher interest rates, of the higher costs of living. And the trouble is, if they do too much, it can actually push inflation higher, and we get more pain when the government, when the Reserve Bank increase interest rates even higher.
I think one thing that people find so frustrating is that you're hearing one thing from Philip Lowe and from the RBA saying we need to keep hiking interest rates to make sure inflation is curbed, and then you have another expert saying no, we need to stop or slow down the hikes in interest rates. And when this is having real impacts on people's lives and their ability to meet repayments or put food on the table, how do you account for those differences in opinions?
So with economists, it is not unusual, nor is it unhealthy for them to have differing opinions, so long as we're all on the same page as to what we want to achieve, which is the welfare of Australia and the prosperity. But there are groups who represent other constituents. For example, a politician who has constituents with mortgages. They're suffering and they want to see interest rates not rise. Or think charities. They're trying to protect their clients from more pain and suffering because they are the ones that suffer the most.
Some very good questions there as to why are we raising the interest rate, what is it doing overall, and are we getting the desired results? To me, it's just a big vicious cycle. I don't think it sort of achieves what, well, of course it will tighten and people will feel the pinch. That's about it, I would reckon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now I'd like to talk about an upcoming show and live with Somlatha Acharya, live in concert right here in Brisbane on the 25th. Let's take a look at what the show might bring with it.
Sargam Music Academy, More Than Home Loans, and Picture Hub Production presents Somlatha and the Aces for the first time in Brisbane, Australia. Performing live on the of February 2023.
কিছু আবদারের জানি নেই মানে তোর সঙ্গে আজ আমাকে নিয়ে এগিয়ে দে দু এক পা হাঁটতে চাই তোর সাথে
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio, and that Somlata Sau coming right to Brisbane, and we are glad to be supporting that event. So here's the details once again, and please get your tickets. This is going to be one beautiful and wonderful show. Of course, Sargam Music Academy, Bondita and Mithun are supporting that. Bengali Society of Queensland is supporting the event. Brisbane Indian Times and Australian Indian Radio are always proud supporters of such events, and we are so proud to be supporting this event as well. So we'd like to see you all there. Well, for now, it's time to say goodbye. That's about all that we have for you today, and we will be